The arrival of the Valkyrie. The sky above Earth split open with a loud, unnatural sound. A massive spaceship, dark and metallic, pushed through the atmosphere. It was not like anything humans had ever seen before. The ship was smooth, shaped like a spearhead, with glowing blue symbols running across its surface. Inside the ship, a group of tall, powerful warriors stood in formation. They were not human. Their skin had a faint silver glow, and their eyes burned like fire. They wore heavy armor, made of a material stronger than anything found on Earth. Their weapons were sharp, deadly, and far beyond human technology. These were the Valkyrie, an alien race known across the galaxy for their strength and battle skills. They conquered worlds, defeated powerful enemies, and never showed weakness. But to them, humans were nothing more than weak creatures. General Zirana, the leader of the Valkyrie warriors, looked at the Earth with a smirk. She was taller than any human man, with muscles that rippled like steel. Her long black hair was tied back, and a scar ran across her left cheek, a mark from a battle. The humans looked at each other. Was this a joke? A giant alien woman, covered in armor, asking for a duel. No one stepped forward. Zirana laughed again. I knew it. Weak. She turned to leave, shaking her head. There is no warrior spirit here. But then, a voice called out, I'll fight you. Everyone turned. A man stepped forward from the crowd. He wasn't the biggest soldier, nor the most heavily armed, but there was something in his eyes, something strong, unshaken. His name was Captain Ryan Carter. He locked eyes with Zirana. You think we're weak, he said. Let me show you what a human can do. Zirana raised an eyebrow. A small part of her was intrigue. She smiled. This will be interesting. The man who stood up. Silence fell over the battlefield of concrete and steel. The wind carried the murmurs of the gathered crowd, their breath held tight in their chests. The Valkyrie warriors stood tall, their glowing eyes fixed on the human who had dared to step forward. The human soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain whether to admire Captain Ryan Carter's bravery or fear for his life. Ryan wasn't the biggest man in the unit. He wasn't covered in bulky armor, nor did he carry any advanced weaponry. He looked normal, a man who had seen too much war, but had never let it break him. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. Zirana smirked. You, she said, stepping closer to him, her towering figure casting a long shadow. I asked for a warrior, not a fool. Ryan shrugged. You wanted a fight. I'm giving you one. The other Valkyrie chuckled. One of them, a broad-shouldered warrior with deep red markings on his face, stepped beside Zirana. General, this is beneath you, he said. This creature is not worth your time. Zirana, however, wasn't so sure. There was something in Ryan's stance, something she couldn't quite place. Humans were small, fragile creatures. But this one didn't seem afraid. He should have been. She tilted her head. What is your name, human? Captain Ryan Carter, he said. Captain, she repeated, testing the word. And you fight for honor. Ryan shook his head. I fight because I have to. Zirana's smirk faded slightly. She had heard those words before, from warriors who had seen too many battles, from soldiers who had lost too much. For the first time, a flicker of curiosity crossed her expression. Still, it didn't matter. He was just a man, and she would break him. Zirana raised her voice. Very well, Captain Ryan Carter. If you wish to fight, you shall have your chance. She turned to her warriors. Clear the area. No weapons. No armor. The crowd gasped. No armor. The Valkyrie's armor was nearly impenetrable. Removing it meant she would be fighting on equal ground. Ryan smirked. Maybe she's not just all talk. The challenge begins. The Valkyrie warriors formed a circle around them, creating a makeshift arena. The human soldiers stood behind them, watching anxiously. The air was thick with tension. Zirana removed her heavy breastplate, letting it drop with a loud thud that cracked the pavement beneath it. She rolled her shoulders, her muscles shifting beneath her silver-toned skin. Even without armor, she looked like she was carved from stone. Ryan, on the other hand, wore nothing more than his combat uniform. He loosened his shoulders, shook his hands, and exhaled slowly. A Valkyrie warrior raised his arm. The challenge begins. Now. Zirana moved first. She was fast, faster than anyone that size had a right to be. She lunged forward, her fist cutting through the air like a cannonball. Ryan barely had time to react. He threw himself to the side, rolling just as her punch shattered the ground where he had been standing. The crowd gasped. A hit like that would have killed him instantly. Ryan scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. Damn, she's strong. Zirana smirked. Running already. Ryan didn't answer. He watched her closely, analyzing. She was powerful, but she was aggressive, overconfident. She was used to enemies falling with a single hit. I can use that. Zirana charged again. This time, Ryan didn't dodge completely. He sidestepped, just enough to avoid her main strike, then swung his elbow into her ribs. Cracky. The impact made Zirana stumble slightly. The crowd froze. No human should have been able to land a hit like that on a Valkyrie. Zirana's eyes flashed. She touched her side. No real damage, but she had felt it. Her smirk widened. Interesting. She lunged again, faster this time. Ryan barely dodged, her fist grazing his shoulder, sending a shock through his arm. He rolled away, trying to regain his footing. But Zirana was already moving, pressing forward with rapid strikes. Ryan blocked one, dodged another, but she was relentless. A heavy kick struck his side, sending him skidding across the ground. Dust rose in the air. The human soldiers flinched. Ryan gritted his teeth, rolling onto his knees. His ribs ached. If that kick had landed clean, he would have been broken. Zirana cracked her knuckles. You're quick, human, but how long can you last? Ryan exhaled, pushing himself up. He wiped the blood from his lip and gave her a small, cocky grin. Long enough. Zirana's eyes gleamed. Good. She attacked again. The battle of wits. This time, Ryan wasn't just dodging. He was studying. Every move she made, every shift in her weight. He watched it all. She was strong, yes, but she wasn't a trained fighter, not like he was. She relied on brute strength. She expected enemies to go down fast. Ryan changed tactics. Instead of dodging far, he dodged just enough to make her overextend. Each time she missed, he struck back. Small hits, quick strikes to her joints and ribs. Annoying, precise, effective. The Valkyrie warriors murmured amongst themselves. This human is adapting. Zirana growled. She hadn't expected this. He was reading her. With a snarl, she swung a brutal fist, only for Ryan to duck low and slam his palm against her knee. She stumbled, her balance shifting for just a second. And that second was all Ryan needed. He pivoted and delivered a powerful kick to her ribs. Zirana staggered back. Silence. For the first time, a Valkyrie warrior had been pushed back by a human. Ryan straightened, breathing hard. His knuckles ached, but he kept his stance firm. Zirana touched her ribs. She wasn't hurt badly, but she had felt it. Her gaze locked onto Ryan's. And then, she laughed. A deep, genuine laugh. The other Valkyrie were stunned. Their general never laughed in battle. Zirana smirked. You are something else, human. Ryan wiped his brow. That mean I win? Zirana cracked her neck. Not yet. She clenched her fists, lowering into a real fighting stance. This time, she wouldn't underestimate him. Ryan sighed. Great. The crowd braced themselves. The real fight was about to begin. A fight like no other. The battlefield was silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. Dust swirled in the air, illuminated by the golden glow of the setting sun. The Valkyrie warriors, standing in a circle around the combatants, watched in stunned silence. Their leader, General Zirana, had just been forced back by a human, a feat none of them had ever thought possible. Ryan Carter stood firm, shaking the ache from his knuckles. His uniform was dirt-streaked, his body sore, but he wasn't broken. Not yet. Zirana, for the first time in years, felt a rare thrill of excitement. A real fight. A real challenge. She hadn't expected this human to last more than a few seconds, yet here he was, standing tall, his eyes sharp, his breath steady. Her smirk widened. "Human," she said, cracking her knuckles, "you are the first of your kind to ever impress me." Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow. "Glad I could make your day special." Zirana laughed. A deep, rich sound that made some of the Valkyrie warriors shift uneasily. Their general never laughed in combat. But the amusement faded from her eyes as she settled back into a stance. This time, she wasn't playing around. "This has been entertaining," she said. "But now I fight you seriously." Ryan's heart pounded. He had been reading her movements, looking for openings, using strategy over brute strength. But if she had been holding back before? He exhaled. "All right, Carter. Time to dig deep." The ground beneath them seemed to tremble as Zirana launched forward. She was even faster than before. Ryan barely had time to react. He threw himself sideways as her fist came down like a meteor. The impact behind him shattered the pavement into a crater. If that had hit me. No time to think. Zirana was already moving again, spinning into a sweeping kick. Ryan jumped back, but her foot caught his ribs just enough to send him tumbling. Pain exploded through his side, but he gritted his teeth, rolling back to his feet. Zirana was on him instantly. A brutal punch came for his head. Ryan ducked. A second strike aimed for his gut. He sidestepped. She was relentless. Faster, sharper, deadlier. But Ryan wasn't just surviving. He was learning. Zirana was powerful, but she still had flaws. She fought like a warrior used to overwhelming force, not precision. Ryan could use that. A split-second opening. Ryan ducked low and drove his shoulder into her stomach. It was like hitting solid steel, but the force of it made her stumble slightly. He followed up with a sharp elbow to her ribs. Crack. Zirana's eyes widened. That actually hurt. The watching Valkyrie warriors murmured amongst themselves. A human. Landing real hits. Zirana stepped back, rolling her shoulders, analyzing Ryan with newfound intensity. "Fascinating," she muttered. "You're no ordinary human, are you?" Ryan smirked, wincing slightly. "Lady, I'm just a guy who doesn't like losing." Zirana chuckled. But there was something else in her eyes now. Respect. "Good," she said, "because this fight isn't over yet." The turning point. The duel raged on. Zirana struck like lightning, but Ryan adapted with every move. He wasn't faster. He wasn't stronger. But he was smarter. He used her own momentum against her. When she lunged, he sidestepped and struck weak points. Joints, ribs, pressure points. Small attacks, but they added up. The Valkyrie warriors were no longer laughing. They were watching, studying. This wasn't just a battle. It was a test. Zirana breathed heavily, sweat glistening on her silver-toned skin. She had never fought someone like this. Humans were supposed to be weak, slow. But Ryan Carter, he was proving otherwise. But Zirana was still Valkyrie, and Valkyrie did not lose. With a deep breath, she centered herself, then moved like a storm. Ryan barely had time to react. A spinning kick struck his shoulder, sending him flying back. He hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop. His vision blurred, his chest heaving. Zirana stood over him, eyes blazing. "You fight well, human, but can you still stand?" Ryan groaned, his ribs aching. Then he grinned. Pain shot through his body as he pushed himself up. Slowly, steadily, he wiped the blood from his lip and met her gaze, standing tall. "I'm not done yet," he said. The crowd erupted. Even the Valkyrie warriors, once filled with mocking laughter, now nodded in approval. Their general had fought countless battles, faced monstrous warriors from across the galaxy, but never had she fought someone who kept getting up no matter what. Zirana's smirk returned, and for the first time in her life, she bowed her head slightly. "You, human," she said, voice filled with something close to admiration, "are no weakling." The fight was over. The aftermath. Ryan stood, chest rising and falling with each breath. He had taken a beating, but he had earned something far more valuable. Respect. Zirana turned to her warriors. "Remember this day," she said. "The humans are not what we thought." The Valkyrie warriors murmured, nodding. General Harrison, the human commander, stepped forward. "Does this mean you acknowledge us as equals?" Zirana looked at Ryan. Then, slowly, she smiled. "No," she said, "but you are worthy of standing on the battlefield with us." It was not an insult. It was the highest honor the Valkyrie could give. Ryan smirked. "I'll take it." Zirana chuckled. Then she turned to her warriors. "Prepare the ship," she commanded. "We have seen what we needed to see." As the Valkyrie prepared to depart, Zirana glanced at Ryan one last time. "You are strong, Captain Carter. Perhaps one day we shall meet again." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Next time, maybe we don't punch each other." Zirana grinned. "Where's the fun in that?" And with that, the Valkyrie warriors left. But they would never forget the human who refused to fall, and neither would the rest of the galaxy. Respect earned in battle. The dust had settled, but the air was still thick with tension. The watching soldiers, both human and Valkyrie, stood in stunned silence. The fight was over. The verdict was clear. Ryan Carter, a mere human, had stood toe-to-toe with General Zirana of the Valkyrie and had not broken. The impossible had happened, and the universe had changed. The Valkyrie's realization. Zirana took a slow breath, rolling her shoulders. Her body ached in a way it hadn't in years. Not from pain, but from exertion, from a fight that had actually challenged her. She had faced towering warlords, beasts bred for battle, and elite soldiers of alien empires. Yet here, on this quiet blue planet, a single human had forced her to go beyond what she expected. She turned her gaze to Ryan, who stood there, bruised, breathing hard, but standing. He didn't gloat. He didn't mock. He simply existed, defying every assumption she had about his kind. Her lips curled slightly. Heh. The chuckle was small, almost imperceptible, but the Valkyrie warriors noticed. And the humans did too. General Harrison stepped forward cautiously, standing beside Ryan. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried the weight of history. "So," Harrison asked, arms crossed, "are we still just talkers to you, General?" Zirana tilted her head. "Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment," she admitted. Gasps rippled through the Valkyrie ranks. The general of the Valkyrie, a warrior who had conquered planets, who had never once shown deference to an enemy, was admitting she was wrong. It was subtle, but to the Valkyrie, it was monumental. Ryan let out a small, tired chuckle. "That's the closest thing to a compliment I'll get, isn't it?" Zirana smirked. "Consider it an honor, human." She turned to her warriors. Her tone was firm, her presence commanding. "Remember this battle. We assumed these humans were weak. We assumed they had no strength." She looked back at Ryan. "We were wrong." The Valkyrie warriors murmured amongst themselves. Some were still skeptical, unwilling to let go of their old beliefs. But others, the ones who had witnessed the fight with their own eyes, nodded in solemn agreement. The humans were not what they had thought. And that changed everything. The hidden strength of humanity. Zirana walked toward Ryan, closing the distance between them until she loomed over him. Despite his exhaustion, he did not step back. She studied him for a moment, then spoke quietly so only he could hear. "You did not win, human." Ryan wiped a trickle of blood from his lip and smirked. "Didn't lose either." Zirana's eyes glinted. "You are bold. I like that." Then she did something no one expected. She extended her hand. Ryan hesitated for only a second before clasping it. Her grip was iron, but not crushing. A warrior's handshake, a gesture of respect. The murmurs among the Valkyrie grew louder. Some looked on in disbelief. General Zirana, shaking hands with a human. Unthinkable. But it was happening. The silent acknowledgement meant everything. Ryan pulled his hand back and exhaled. "So what now?" Zirana glanced toward her warriors, then to the sky. "Our mission here was simple, to evaluate Earth's strength. We assumed there was none." She paused, then smirked. "We assumed wrong." Ryan crossed his arms. And Zirana's expression turned serious. "There are threats in this galaxy you cannot imagine, human," she said. "Enemies that would burn your world to ash without a second thought. You have strength, yes. But will it be enough when the time comes?" Ryan held her gaze. "We survive. That's what we do." Zirana nodded. "Perhaps. But survival alone is not victory." She turned back to her warriors. "We leave, but let it be known, the humans are not weak. They have earned our respect." A Valkyrie warrior, still skeptical, stepped forward. "General, does that mean they are our equals?" Zirana glanced at Ryan, then shook her head. "No," she said, "but they are worthy of standing beside us." That was more than enough. The unknown threat. As the Valkyrie prepared their ship for departure, Ryan and Harrison watched from a distance. "You realize what just happened, right?" Harrison muttered. Ryan smirked. "Yeah. We just proved to an alien warrior race that humanity isn't to be messed with." Harrison exhaled. "That's the problem. If they've changed their opinion of us, others will too." Ryan's smirk faded slightly. "You think this'll attract attention?" Harrison nodded grimly. "The kind we might not be ready for." Ryan looked at the Valkyrie ship, its engines roaring to life. Zirana stood at the ramp, staring down at him with a knowing expression. Then she said something unexpected. "Train harder, human." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Zirana's smirk was gone. Her tone was deadly serious. "Because next time, the enemy won't be me." With that, she turned and boarded the ship. The engines flared, and the massive vessel lifted off, vanishing into the sky. Ryan stood there, watching the sky darken where the ship had disappeared. Something about her words left a deep unease in his gut. Harrison sighed. "I don't know if we should be celebrating or worrying." Ryan rolled his shoulder, wincing slightly. "A little of both, probably." He turned to the watching soldiers, human and alien alike. They had all just witnessed history, a battle that would be remembered, a turning point. But one thought wouldn't leave Ryan's mind. Zirana's final words. What did she mean by "the enemy won't be me"? A storm was coming. He could feel it, and humanity would have to be ready. The hidden strength of humanity. The Valkyrie warship disappeared into the endless sky, its engines leaving a faint echo in the distance. The crowd, human soldiers and civilians alike, remained frozen, as if time had stopped. The impossible had happened. Captain Ryan Carter had fought a Valkyrie general and lived. But beneath the awe and the murmurs of victory, an unease settled in his gut. Next time, the enemy won't be me. Zirana's words played on a loop in Ryan's mind. She wasn't mocking him. She was warning him. The aftermath. A changed perspective. In the days following the Valkyrie's departure, the world buzzed with speculation. News channels broadcasted the fight across the globe, making Ryan an unexpected symbol of human resilience. Military strategists analyzed every frame, breaking down the Valkyrie's strength, their tactics, their technology. Scientists debated whether humanity's survival instinct was its greatest weapon. Ryan, however, hated the attention. He was no hero. He had barely survived that fight. And the worst part, the real battle hadn't even started yet. Sitting in a high-level military briefing, Ryan's mind drifted as the politicians and generals debated their next move. "We should begin diplomatic efforts to form a treaty with the Valkyrie," one ambassador insisted. "No, we should be preparing for potential hostilities," another countered. "They may have left peacefully, but they still see us as inferior." General Harrison remained quiet, arms crossed, watching the arguments unfold. He finally cut in. "Enough. Silence. We're missing the bigger issue here," Harrison said. "The Valkyrie didn't come here to conquer us. They came to test us." Ryan nodded. "And I think they found their answer." Harrison met his gaze. "Exactly." The room was silent as the realization sank in. The Valkyrie weren't humanity's true threat. They were preparing humanity for something worse. And whatever it was coming. Signs of a new enemy. Weeks passed, and strange things began happening. Unusual energy readings were detected in deep space, far beyond Earth's solar system. Disappearing colonies, entire human settlements on distant moons went silent overnight. Fragments of intercepted messages, garbled and distorted, contained a name that sent chills down the spines of intelligence operatives. The Kordath. No one knew what it meant. No records, no historical mentions, but the Valkyrie had spoken that name once before. A ghost of a threat, a whispered warning. Ryan, now stationed at Earth's top defense facility, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The Valkyrie had been arrogant, sure, but they weren't afraid of humans. They were afraid of something else. An unexpected return. One night, alarms blared across the base. Ryan shot up from his bunk, adrenaline already pumping. He sprinted toward the command center, where General Harrison and his top officers were gathered around the main screen. Ryan's stomach dropped. The Valkyrie warship had just entered Earth's orbit, but something was wrong. It was damaged. Flames flickered along its hull, large chunks of metal missing. It was limping through space, its once proud structure battered beyond recognition. "This is General Harrison of Earth Defense," Harrison spoke into the comms. "Valkyrie vessel, you are entering restricted airspace. Identify yourself." Static. Then, a weak voice crackled through. "This is General Zirana of the Valkyrie Empire, requesting emergency landing." Ryan's blood ran cold. Zirana, wounded, asking for help. Something had shaken the Valkyrie. Something had hunted them down. And if the Valkyrie were running, what chance did humanity have? The warning comes too late. The Valkyrie ship crash-landed in a secure military zone, sliding across the ground before finally coming to a halt. Flames and smoke billowed from its engines. Ryan and a team of soldiers rushed forward, weapons at the ready. But when the doors hissed open, no one was prepared for what stepped out. Zirana stumbled forward, her once unbreakable armor shattered, her face covered in cuts and bruises. She had never looked weak before. Behind her, a handful of Valkyrie warriors limped out, their expressions grim. There were so few of them. Ryan caught Zirana before she collapsed. Her breath was shallow, her strength almost gone, but her grip was still ironclad on his arm. "Ryan," she rasped, looking straight into his eyes. "They're coming." Ryan's stomach twisted. "Who?" Zirana clenched her jaw, fear flashing in her eyes, something he had never seen before. "The Kordath." Ryan barely had time to process those words before a low, unearthly sound echoed across the base. A pulse. A signal. The soldiers stiffened as their radios crackled with static. The lights flickered. Something was here. Zirana forced herself to stand. She turned her gaze to the sky. "They'd followed us," she whispered. And then, high above Earth, a second shadow appeared. A vessel, larger than any ship humanity had ever encountered. Its surface was black as the void, shifting like liquid metal. No markings, no insignias, just pure darkness. The air grew heavy. A deep, inhuman frequency hummed through the atmosphere. Ryan's instincts screamed. Harrison turned to his officers. Get every defense system online. Now. Ryan pulled Zirana to her feet. What the hell are we dealing with? Zirana's voice was hollow. Extinction. And then the sky opened up. An unlikely alliance. The sky ripped apart as the Kordath warship emerged from the void. It was unlike anything Earth had ever seen, a nightmare given form. The colossal vessel didn't have engines, didn't reflect light. It absorbed it, a jagged monolith of shifting black metal that seemed alive. No symbols, no insignias, just an endless, pulsing darkness. Ryan Carter felt it before he heard it. A deep subsonic hum resonated in his chest, not a sound but a pressure, an alien frequency that made the air itself feel wrong. Every soldier at the base froze. For the first time, Earth was staring at true terror. And they weren't ready. Zirana's warning. Zirana, still weak but standing, turned to General Harrison. You need to listen, she said, her voice ragged but urgent. Harrison narrowed his eyes. What are we dealing with? Zirana exhaled, her silver-toned skin glistening with sweat. The Kordath aren't an empire. They aren't warriors like us. They don't conquer planets. Ryan clenched his jaw. Then what do they do? Zirana's golden eyes met his, and for the first time since they had met. She looked afraid. They consumed them. A chill ran through the command center. Ryan turned to the view screen, staring up at the alien ship. What do you mean? Then the power cut out. Total blackout. Radios went silent. Screens flickered into static. Emergency sirens choked and died. And then, from the depths of the Kordath ship, they began to descend. The Kordath make contact. From the ship's dark underbelly, figures began to emerge. They didn't use drop pods, didn't deploy with jetpacks. They simply fell, silent shadows cascading from the sky. As they neared the ground, their forms shifted, twisting unnaturally before landing with fluid grace. Ryan tightened his grip on his rifle, but his gut told him something terrifying. Bullets wouldn't matter. The Kordath soldiers stood too still. They were humanoid in shape, but wrong. Tall, their bodies draped in what looked like liquid obsidian, shifting and reforming with each subtle movement. Their limbs were too long, their fingers tapering into black, razor-thin claws. But it was their faces that sent fear into every human who laid eyes on them, because they didn't have any. No mouths, no noses, only a single vertical slit where their eyes should be. And when they opened, it wasn't light that shined through. It was hunger. The first strike. A soldier, trembling, broke first. He fired. A crack of gunfire shattered the silence. The bullet hit, but instead of piercing, the Kordath warrior's body rippled, like a stone dropped into a black ocean. Then it reformed. Untouched. Ryan barely had time to react before the Kordath moved. It blurred, crossing the distance between them in a fraction of a second. The soldier had no time to scream before the creature's arm pierced through his chest like a blade. The body convulsed, collapsed into itself. And then the soldier was gone. Not dead. Erased. The Kordath absorbed him, his form sinking into the entity's shifting mass. No body, no blood, just nothing left. Panic erupted. The soldiers opened fire, unloading everything they had. Bullets, explosives, plasma rounds. The Kordath walked through it all. The first battle for Earth had begun, and humanity was losing. The alliance is forged in blood. Ryan ran, not away from the fight, but toward it. Fall back, he shouted, grabbing a stunned soldier and pulling him behind cover. Harrison ducked behind a transport, barking orders. All units, regroup ATCCC2R4. We need a strategy. Zirana didn't run. She charged. With a battle cry, she leaped, her fists shattering the skull of a Kordath warrior. But instead of dying, the creature reformed. Zirana growled. "They're regenerators." Ryan fired a few rounds, but the Kordath ignored him. "You fought them before," he said, turning to Zirana. "How do we kill them?" Zirana clenched her fists. "The Kordath aren't like anything else. You don't kill them with force." Ryan wiped sweat from his brow. "Then how?" Zirana looked at him, her expression grim. "You starve them." Ryan frowned. "What does that mean?" "They feed on energy," she explained. "Heat, kinetic force. The more we fight, the more they adapt." Ryan's stomach dropped. Their own weapons were making the Kordath stronger. Harrison cursed under his breath. "So we're just supposed to stand here and die?" Zirana shook her head. "No. We find the source, their core network. Cut them off, and they weaken. It's the only way." Ryan took a breath. He looked up at the hundreds of Kordath warriors pouring down from the sky. Then he looked at Zirana. "All right, then we fight smart." And for the first time, a human and a Valkyrie stood side by side. Not as enemies, but as allies. The plan for survival. The battle raged across the base, but Ryan and Zirana moved with purpose. They didn't try to fight every Kordath. They focused on finding the core, the source of their power. Zirana led the way, using her knowledge of Kordath biology to guide them toward their command structure. Ryan's team followed, moving like ghosts through the chaos. But as they neared the main comm tower, a terrible realization dawned. The Kordath were learning. They weren't just attacking blindly. They were adapting. And they were waiting. Because when Ryan and Zirana reached the tower, they saw it. The prime Kordath, a being taller than any other, its form shifting, flowing, watching. Ryan's breath hitched. It knew who they were. And it had been expecting them. The prime Kordath spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but in a deep, nauseating pressure inside their minds. "You are different." Zirana clenched her fists, stepping forward. "We are warriors, and we will end you." The prime Kordath tilted its head. No. Ryan felt it. A force unlike anything before. A presence bigger than planets. And then the sky split open again. More Kordath ships were arriving. This wasn't an invasion. It was an eradication. And Earth was the next planet to fall. The ultimate battle and a new respect. The sky was breaking. Kordath ships, massive and silent, poured through the rift like living shadows. The pressure in the air was suffocating, the deep hum of their presence rattling the bones of every living thing. Earth wasn't under attack. It was being erased. Ryan Carter stood on the battlefield, his uniform streaked with dust and blood, his rifle feeling useless in his hands. The weapons they had didn't work. The strategies they knew didn't apply. And yet, he wasn't afraid. Because standing beside him was General Zirana of the Valkyrie, an enemy who had become an ally. And in front of them, the prime Kordath loomed, watching, waiting. The war begins. The battle around them exploded. Human soldiers fought desperately, using everything they had. Flamethrowers, high-yield explosives, railguns, but nothing worked for long. The Kordath absorbed heat. They absorbed force. The more Earth's forces fought, the stronger they became. Zirana roared, launching herself into the fray, her fists breaking the sound barrier as she smashed into a group of Kordath warriors. They absorbed the force, but not fast enough. Her strikes shattered one, another. But they kept coming. Ryan moved on instinct, calling out to the human squads. Fall back. Redirect energy-based weapons. Focus on suppression, not destruction. They needed a new strategy. They needed a miracle. And then, the sky cracked open again. But this time, it wasn't the Kordath. It was the Valkyrie fleet. The Valkyrie joined the fight. Multiple Valkyrie warships descended like meteors, their hulls gleaming under the burning sky. Thousands of Valkyrie warriors dropped from orbit, landing in perfect formation, their weapons primed. A massive transmission echoed across every battlefield. Humans, we fight keep beside you. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Zirana smirked. I told you we respect strength. Your fight is now our fight. The battlefield changed in an instant. Where human forces struggled, the Valkyrie pushed back. Where Kordath absorbed energy, the Valkyrie countered with pure physical destruction. Where humanity was outgunned, the Valkyrie evened the odds. But even with their combined strength, the prime Kordath still stood, watching, waiting. And then it moved. The true enemy reveals itself. Ryan barely had time to react. The prime Kordath vanished and reappeared right in front of him. It didn't move like a being. It moved like a concept, fluid, unbound by time. A black, shifting hand reached for Ryan, its touch a whisper against reality itself. Pain. Deep, endless pain. Ryan felt his body unraveling. Like he wasn't being killed. Like he was being erased from existence. Zirana lunged forward, slamming into the prime Kordath with enough force to shatter mountains. But it barely flinched. Instead, it spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but in pure thought. You are nothing. Zirana snarled, unafraid. We will prove you wrong. The prime Kordath tilted its head. You misunderstand. You were never meant to exist. You are anomalies. Broken pieces of a decayed universe. We are the correction. Ryan clenched his fists. You mean, you think we're mistakes? No, you are errors in the grand equation. A deep pressure filled the air. The prime Kordath wasn't just an invader. It was a force of cosmic erasure, and it wasn't here to conquer. It was here to reset existence itself. The plan for survival. Ryan turned to Zirana. We can't kill it. You said they feed on energy. What about a total shutdown? Zirana's golden eyes flickered with understanding. A void, she whispered. No energy, no movement, no sustenance. Ryan nodded. We don't fight it. We starve it. Harrison's voice crackled over the comms. How the hell do we do that? Ryan turned to the Valkyrie fleet. We shut down everything. EMP strikes, power drains. No force, no movement, nothing they can absorb. Zirana grinned. A death of silence. It was risky. Insane. But it was the only chance they had. The great silence. The order went out. Every power source, every energy weapon, every kinetic system, shut down. The battlefield fell silent. No gunfire, no explosions, just the wind. The Kordath hesitated. They didn't know what to do. Ryan could feel it. The prime Kordath was losing power. The absence of energy weakened them. Zirana took a step forward. Looks like your equation is flawed. The prime Kordath trembled, its form flickering. Impossible. Ryan exhaled, exhaustion creeping in. Not impossible. He stared the prime Kordath in its hollow, unblinking slit of an eye. Human. And with one final pulse, the Kordath collapsed into nothing. The war was over. The aftermath, and a new respect. The battlefield was a graveyard. But humanity had won. The Valkyrie had fought alongside them, not as conquerors, but as allies. Zirana turned to Ryan, crossing her arms. Well, human, it seems we are still here after all. Ryan, exhausted and barely standing, grinned. Told you we're survivors. She studied him for a moment, then did something no Valkyrie had ever done to a human before. She bowed. A slight nod of the head. A warrior's respect. The watching Valkyrie soldiers followed her lead. For the first time in history, the strongest warriors in the galaxy acknowledged humanity as their equals. Ryan smirked. Humanity? Yeah. Asterisk asterisk. The end, or just the beginning. The war was over, but the galaxy had changed. The Valkyrie had learned to respect humans, and other empires were watching. Ryan turned his gaze to the stars. He had a feeling this wasn't the last time humanity would have to prove itself. But next time, they wouldn't be underestimated. They would be feared. And that was just how Ryan liked it.